Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 146. I have Alex Chafuen here. He was born and raised in Argentina, but now he's with the Acton Institute, the wonderful Christian libertarian think tank here in America. And he's also contributes to Forbes magazine now and then. So we're going to talk again about Javier Milei. This will be our 31st show talking about Milei, but we're going to talk about, Milei's relationship with the church. And he also knows a whole lot about Patricia Bullrich, who I've certainly been critical of Patricia in the past, but now that she's in Milei's cabinet, I've got to play nice. So how are you, Alex?
I'm fine, living this moment that I thought would never live. So
yes, it's I've said it's the most important election in the history of the world. It's maybe I'm exaggerating, but you've got to believe. So how did you get started in all this? You were born and raised down there. So yeah.
Oh, it's very long story. And a good friend of mine, a libertarian by the name of Walter Block, he has a book, it must be online, where he collects stories about how we became liberal. Again, I use liberal in the non-corrupted sense of the word. Americans, yes. I think I know why they lost the word again. But basically, during my teenager years, I had a tennis partner whose dad had been involved early on in the group of intellectuals who studied one of the founding fathers of Argentina by the name of Juan Bautista Alberdi. Look, I'm carried him in my tie. He was a mid-19th century lawyer, Catholic lawyer, who studied several constitutions and drafted the essential parts of a constitution and a manual of how you had to interpret that constitution for a civil society and a free society. And that led to 78 years of tremendous prosperity, because in the only successful coup that we had a long-term successful coup in Argentina in the mid-19th century, a general by the name of Justo José Urquiza, with support of the Brazilians and the Uruguayans, defeated a democratic tyrant in Buenos Aires, Juan Manuel de Rosas. And Argentina, who was very poor and always fighting, from the 1853 onwards, suddenly became one of the richest countries in the world. So through this father of one of my friends, I met these intellectuals, and they were in touch with a group influenced by Leonard Read, who founded the Foundation for Economic Education in New York, in Irvington of Hudson. And someone who was a consul of the military government in the United States, Alberto Venegas Lynch Sr., helped found a similar organization in Argentina called Centro de Estudios sobre la Libertad, an intellectual think tank that would clone the work that the Foundation for Economic Education was doing at that time. So basically, since my late teens, I fell in love with liberty. And I have worked all my life in the defense of our ideas.
Yeah. So you're at the Acton Institute now. So you spend more time in the U.S. now, or spend maybe half and half, or?
No, I moved because I then during my last years of the university, this think tank that I mentioned, Centro de Estudios sobre la Libertad, which is very important to explain what's going on today.
Centro Estudio Libertad, yes.
Centro de Estudios sobre la Libertad. This would translate Center for the Study of Liberty. Yeah. And basically, they in 1958, Venegas Lynch brought Ludwig von Mises to give a series of lectures in Argentina at the State University. It has been published because his widow found the transcripts. It's called Six Lessons on Economics. This is the Brazilian edition of this incredible speeches. Yeah. And but I was born in 1954, but in the mid 70s, Venegas Lynch invited Dr. Hans Senholz, a disciple of Ludwig von Mises.
Yes, he
was
got
a
his
key
PhD
professor.
under Mises. Yes.
Yeah, he was a key professor of Grove City College, where I studied, and I have been a trustee for the college, I think, for more than 12 years. So when I finished my university, Dr. Senhol asked me if I wanted to go to study with him. And Venegas Lynch gave me that scholarship. So through Venegas Lynch's father and the Austrian School of Economics, I came to study in the United States. Later in one of those trips, I was writing a book about the Christian foundations of the free market. And I met the lady who's now have been my wife since 1985. So again, I live mostly in the United States, but I live 1/3 of my time flying around the globe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are two. I think there are two economists who got their PhDs under Mises who are still alive. I know Israel Kirzner is still alive, and I believe George Reisman also.
George Reisman, yes, but I don't think Israel got the PhD under hands. I should check it. But George,
under Mises, yeah.
Under Mises, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're right. Perfect. But I don't know if George is alive, but Israel is I have deep admiration for the work of Israel.
He's alive as far as I know. That that's why when I heard about Milei going to New York, I said he should meet up with Kirzner.
What a great idea. Let me put that in my agenda.
Yeah. And by the way, I'd love to have Kirzner on here. I don't know how easy it is to get hold of him, but I've heard he doesn't even use email, so he's maybe not one to do a podcast. But anyway, let's get to the topic here, though. So, Milei was inaugurated, about a month ago now, and we've got a cabinet. And you mentioned, also that you've known Patricia Bullrich for a long time. Your sister played on a field hockey team with her. So yeah, what can you tell us about Bullrich and her history?
Well, again, remember that would have been when she was 17, so approximately 50 years ago. Yeah. And again, one of my sisters was 3-time sub-champion of the world. Argentina has one of the best hockey teams in the world, and she played for the varsity, almost the first division of the best hockey team. At the time, was a lot of confusion. The Peronism was trying to come back to the country by egging the left-wing movement, which had a terrorist segment called Montoneros. Patricia was a member of that. I knew of her left-leaning tendencies at the time, but not that she was of the hard branch of that Montoneros movement. But she gradually moved, an independent lady. She gradually moved towards ideas closer to the free society. Yes. For me, her glory to fame was when she was appointed Minister of Labor. With the Radical Party. And she was the only person that I know that really confronted the labor unions with the principles of free association and transparency. Other ones always try to capture the labor unions as a key element of the fascist structure that has dominated Argentina. I use fascist in the original term. It's business, the labor unions and government all working hand in hand to whatever the leader wants. In this case, the leader was Perón, directly or indirectly through most of Argentinian history. Peronism has ruled Argentina, usually, sometimes with Peronists in power. But so that is the problem, that there is a sort of cultural thing that has been going in Argentina for like the 8 decades. But Patricia, so I remember having her at the turn of the century as a speaker, trying to explain to Germans that they had to liberalize, their labor laws, because Germany, as you know, was going down the hill with the work ethic and everything at the turn of the century. And then Patricia, during the government of Macri, he entered into the field of homeland security. And I know this is controversial for libertarians, but because, again, Argentina for sometimes flirted with very evil powers. Perón, as you know, was very close to the Nazis and admired Mussolini. But Patricia basically was very hard against the radical Islamic forces. As you know, Hezbollah did 2 terrorist attacks in Argentina. Patricia was key in Argentina declaring Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. And so there is a saying in Argentina that, when someone is very famous, we say he's like Carlos Gardel. Carlos Gardel was a tango singer, would be like your Elvis Presley. And
Yes.
In Homeland Security and in defense, I say that in the United States, Patricia Bullrich is Gardel because she surprised us many positively in different parts of Argentinian history of the last decades. And for me, it was key, her support, fast support, non-nuanced support. Immediately after the first round of the elections, she said she was going to support Milei in the second round. And that led, to, I think, played a big role in Milei's victory, and also in building a government that has a chance for success, because Milei has no party, no people, and no money. Again, obviously he has a little bit of a party, a little bit of money, and some people. And the Peronists have controlled the thugs in the country, the right wing and the left wing of Argentina, influenced by Peronism. And if they don't like what's going on, they just stop the country. They send their people to the streets and block. And without someone who would deal with that, I think the Milei government would not last long. And as you know, as Milei, given his free market views and anti-state positions, is an existential threat to most of the world we know, and my neighbors here in Washington, they were saying that Milei was going to turn into a dictator and he was going to be a new fascist, and imagine if Milei would have been in charge of trying to stop some of the revolts and blockades and that they already started, but right now Patricia is very well connected. We have seen how the left works in other countries to destabilize when they lose an election. So again, it's a challenge, but I'm very glad that Patricia Bullrich is collaborating in this government and in the area of security and homeland security.
Yeah, I mean, I've often compared this to these teenage hackers who, end up, and then they like somebody like Kevin Mitnick, and then later they end up becoming security consultants. So they used to break into computer systems, and now they're working for these big corporations to tell them this is how you keep people from breaking into your computer system. And they know how the bad guys think, and that's the whole point. They're just they go from black hats to white hats.
For sure. In Latin America, tax inspectors are famous for that. That's how they get to be the accountants for major corporations. They find big corporations doing, evading taxes or eluding taxes, and then they get hired. And they create a sort of vicious circle of negative circle.
I can imagine. Also, the accountants go to work for the. Oh, geez, yeah, that's gotta be interesting, because I know the tax system is awful, and I've heard that it's very much a problem where they'll just go out and stand in the road and block traffic, and and Milei has made it, and they've made it clear, if you want to stand on the sidewalk, or if you want to stand out on the lawn and protest, that's completely fine. You will not be arrested. You will not be harassed. But if you go out into these streets and just attempt to paralyze the streets, then that's going to be a problem. And they're also going to charge these nonprofit groups and send them bills and other things. It's rather interesting to see how this is working. I hope it. So we still have peaceful protesting legalized. It's just but some people are complaining, but just they can't go out and block the big intersections. In America, they were, around Christmas, they were blocking, the roads to airports. Oh yeah, just keep people from traveling, I guess. But yeah, so I don't know if they're doing that. But so Bullrich was also been very much involved with labor, you said. So she's been fighting? Is it mostly private unions or government unions? What's the union makeup in Argentina right now?
Well, Argentina copied the Carta di Lavoro, the document about labor produced by the fascist government of Italy.
Yeah.
So the unions are mostly government endorsed or not government. They have the monopoly of the representation in each area of industry and commerce. There was a historical moment in Argentina at the first electoral defeat of Peronism, with the full Peronist running, was when a radical. There's a party founded in 1890 called Unión Cívica Radical, and it started as a libertarian, free market, classical liberal party. But then in the 40s, he joined the Socialist International. But this man, Raúl Alfonsín, one of the first things he passed in government was trying to pass all the labor unions to the Ministry of Labor. And at the time, a free market party headed by Álvaro Alzogaray, who was a social market economic guy, member of the Montpellerin Society. Álvaro Alzogaray, his party had like 8%, so it could have determined the vote. And basically says, look, no, we follow the principle of free association. So we rather have the unions as we have them now, independent from government, despite that we don't like that the government gave them the monopoly, rather than having them be part of the Ministry of Labor and more directly tied to government. So but the labor unions, have they do do healthcare. They provide a lot of they have a lot of monopolies, and up to recently, they could take from your salary their dues in a mandatory way. And one of the decrees, one of the articles in the decree of national urgency that Milei sent to the Congress basically eliminates this mandatory dues paid to the union, making them totally voluntary. So imagine that is a major threat to the labor unions that are very powerful in Argentina.
Yeah, is it so? It's private sector and public sector unions mostly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So yeah, so one thing that I'm a little worried about is if Milei can cut all these programs this easily, would it be just as easy for somebody like Massa to get back in there and start all of them up again?
Well, but that's one of the major problems that we face. In reality, nothing beats winning the battle of ideas. And again, those of us who sell ideas exaggerate how much we are influenced. Argentina, ideas did not change from one day to the other. Milei has helped educate tremendously part of the population, especially the youth. But you understand, you don't change 8 decades of one type of thinking to another. And so the new constitution of Argentina allows for this decrease. And recently, even a few days ago, the head of Academy of Juridical Sciences of Argentina just presented a complete document of how what Milei has done is totally constitutional. But as you say, another president can come and reverse them. I just wrote 2 years ago with Milei, we both wrote chapters in a book in honor of a Spaniard economist and anarcho-capitalist by the name of Jesus Huerta de Soto.
Yes, I thought that was Milei's teacher, right?
Sorry?
Was that one of Milei's teachers, Jesus Huerta de Soto? We certainly mentioned him on here before.
Yes. In indirect teachers, yes. And he Jesus must be, just must have passed 70 years old around. He's also an outstanding entrepreneur in the insurance area, but he had created a lot of disciples, we giving him doctorates, at the Universidad Rey Juan Carlos. But in the chapter that I wrote, I focused on the Montpellier and Society papers presented in 1980. For the audience that doesn't know what is the Montpellier and Society, an Austrian economist, political scientist, philosopher by the name of Friedrich Hayek, in 1947 convened a group of 50 people in a little town above Vevey in Switzerland called the Mount of the Pilgrims, Mont Pelerin. I was the youngest member of that group, became in 1980, I was 26 years old. And in that meeting, it was before Reagan was elected, it was at Hoover, and many of the papers basically said, no, it's impossible to beat the bureaucracy, the entrenched bureaucracy. It's so powerful. And one of the points was the one that just you made. After decades of working to increase regulations, to increase government intervention, they have such an apparatus and support group that even if we succeed 1 year in changing, they can come fast and change it back to what is bad. Today, the word that we use to define that is deep state, is the entrenched bureaucracy and the special interests that live and profit from their connections with this entrenched bureaucracy. So, but this is the game we have to play. There's no. I don't see any alternative for Milei than having started with this big push to change so many things at once. It's not conservative, as you know. Conservatives like to change things much slower. But in Milei, again, although he sympathizes with anarcho-capitalism, he's a realist. As an economist, we say that one of the key rules to understand the world is that incentives matter. So now that he's president, his incentives have changed. And again, he has a huge challenge ahead, but I hope he succeeds.
Yeah, well, and some people said he's already won, and because I've talked to people who have become free market because of Milei. Since you're familiar with both countries, I hear, are the colleges and universities even more communist in South America than they are in here in the North America? Are they worse? Are they almost as bad? Or what's the state of the colleges down there? Because that seems like they're socialists in most places.
Very good, very, very, very good question. It's a mixed situation. First, you have to understand that supposedly state universities are free.
Yes.
So they are paid by taxpayers' money. And as you know, another interesting thing that Milei has done in this decree is saying in government communications, you cannot use the word free. Because things are paid by taxpayers. Is there another amazing? All these things, slowly, hopefully, will educate the people. Now,
and that would be gratis in Spanish, right? Gratis.
Sorry, yes, exactly.
Yes, because obviously we don't use the word free, but yes.
In the late 50s, with the libertarian revolution that brought down the first dictatorship of Perón, they allowed the establishment some private university, including my alma mater, the Pontifical Catholic University of Argentina, and then a few others. The Jesuits started another one, and we saw the beginning of some opening in the market. Then it closed again until I think it was during President Menem, this Peronist turned more Western after a few years in his presidency. And so now the level of teaching has been weakened tremendously when we had this totally free, and for a while when the Peronists made it, you didn't have to have an entrance exam, during the 70s, where the communists were trying to take over Argentina, from 73 to 74, when Perón decides to go back to the super right wing, in 74 and 75. So it is more leftist, but even the elite private universities in Argentina are full of left-wing people who get the left-wing ideas, from Harvard or Yale or you name it, or the Ivy Leagues here. but we had pockets of sound economics. The Universidad of Tucumán, which is also state university, is a northern province, had a very good working relation with the University of Chicago. So there were some good economists there. Another university in Mendoza had a little pocket of Austrian economists. And then Venegas Lynch Jr., the son of the person who cloned the Foundation for Economic Education, Venegas Lynch is 83 now and is one of the gurus of Javier Milei. He started in the late 70s a business school where the economics will be Austrian economics. And then there were other pockets. Another think tank turned university is called Universidad di Tella. Believe it or not, the non-economists in that group that were influenced by Oxford University, they turned free market. And so I'm speaking, in the 80s, in the early 80s. So the answer, I don't have a meter where I believe that it would be slightly more left in Argentina than in the United States, but not much worse. Here it's the dominance of left-wing thinking in U.S. universities is amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, that's true. So,
and as you know, Milei was an economic professor, and he defines himself: I'm an economic professor who happens to be a president of the country. That's my job now. But
yes.
in his essence, he's an economics teacher. He would do the same as this old man that I mentioned, who's dead now, Alvaro Alzogaray.
Yeah.
He used to drive intellectual at the Mont Pelerin, which is a meeting of academics. He would go to the academics and speak like a politician. But then he would go to the politician and the businessman and speak like an academic. And I don't know if you have heard Milei's speeches. When he speaks, even with big crowds, he gives you an economic lessons and speaks about monetary policy and Karl Menger and the Austrian school. So it's a unique period in history, and I hope that you're right, that this will be a pivot in. You understand? If this fails completely and the blame goes to the libertarians, forget it. It's the last nail in our coffin. But if this,
I was talking to a cab driver and an Uber driver, and he just said, we've already had these free market revolutions before. He said this is probably because he said I've already heard this one before, so how is Milei going to be any different? And he just said, and I guess he'd just been burned so much that he didn't really believe anymore. And but I don't know. It seems like Milei is a lot more knowledgeable than some of these past people were. Like maybe Macri. I mean, he was a trained economist, but he's really got a task ahead of him here.
Yeah, but because you have to understand, you cannot govern alone.
Yeah.
So Milei has been attacked as being a populist, and
yes,
he's as far as the only populist thing that he said, and again I say it with respect, I don't think he wanted to lie. People who are close to him and people who know, he said, this is a man who's incapable of lying. And imagine for a politician to say that. That it's almost impossible being a politician and not, and basically, so he was saying that the entire cost of the reforms were going to be paid by the caste, the deep state. Yeah. And I'm sorry, the deep state destabilized Bolsonaro, the deep state destabilized President Trump. The power of the bureaucracy and those who live from that bureaucracy are so immense that some part of the caste of the deep state are paying a cost. He eliminated the Ministry of the Woman. He downgraded some ministries. He's trying to take rid the monopoly of banks to issue credit cards. So he's working towards it. But again, I don't think he lied, But his other that was his goal, is that the cast will pay for this cost. But then he had to go look the first economic team. He had to put people who Wall Street and the government mafias here in Washington D.C. know as first team in the economic reform, because the first step he realized was to sort of get some sort of stabilization, so he can go back to his other plan. That was the two messages he had to win the election: was fight against the deep state, the caste, and secondly, dollarize and close the central bank.
Yeah.
So I don't think he has abandoned that goal. But again, when the moment came to choose the economic ministry, instead of choosing his popes, and by that I mean the people who helped draft the dollarization plan and the closing the central bank plan, Emilio Campo and Nicolas Kachanowski, or the people that he said were going to be his chief of staff, which was Carlos Rodriguez. Carlos Rodriguez and his friend Roque Fernandez both played prominent roles in Menem administration. Menem, to the audience, was a sort of populist president of the Peronists who, a few years into his mandate, realized that it was a mistake of Argentina to side with the evil side in the world, and decided to align itself with the United States. Now, the key reforms on rule of law and transparency were not done. A lot of privatizations were done, but ultimately, that system failed by the public spending, lack of control in the provinces. Argentina is a federal country like the United States, and basically the monetary dollarization, that's perhaps what the taxi driver was referring to. Argentina had a 1 to the dollar until the turn of the century. Now, 1 peso is 1,000, sorry, 1,000 pesos is $1. And remember,
Yeah.
just 24 years ago, it was 1 to 1. So perhaps what happened then, Carlos Rodriguez and Roque Fernandez did not enter into the team, and they're a little bit more critical, especially Carlos Rodriguez, of what's going on. He's a very good technical economist, Chicago boy. And while the Austrian economists, who are friends of Milei, are being more patient. There's an outstanding interview by Venegas Lynch Jr., who is a mentor of Javier Milei today or yesterday at the major newspapers of Argentina, where he basically explains, look, we have to be patient. You don't get out of decades of artificial prices, in public services, in energy, gasoline, food, from one day to the other. So again, right now, I think there's several camps. I have said there are people who want to move Milei to their own camp, castrate his radical proposals. There are others who want to take credit for his victory, but there are many others who realize that this is like perhaps one of the last opportunities for Argentina avoid becoming another Venezuela. And I think that's one of my roles. I have been in Argentina 2 weeks before Christmas. Part of my role is to try to tell the Milei team who are the best friends abroad, including the United States, and vice versa. Speaking with people like you, and try to tell you the truth. Look, this is the situation we have. Patricia Bullrich perhaps is not a free market economist, and is not a libertarian, when it comes to guns or drugs, but she plays an important role in XYZ. And similar, Milei has an outstanding foreign minister, Diana Mondino, who was a key professor at this university founded by Chicago boys. So again, it's an amazing opportunity.
Yes, and Deanna Mondino is fluent in English. She is invited. So so I've heard nothing. I've heard great things about her. We also recently did a show talking about Victoria. Any comments on anybody else in Milei's cabinet right now?
Well, Pick an area. Let's go to the. You want me to focus on the area I know more?
Well, whatever you know most about. I mean, if there's anything you're not comfortable. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to.
Well, one of the reforms that was done by Milei was to lower the status of several ministries that now are undersecretaries under the Ministry of Human Capital.
Yeah.
Okay. And there, just to show you the insights of Javier Milei, the first candidate was a good friend of mine, Austrian economist. I bet he's also a fan of Ayn Rand, by the name of Martin Krause. And
Martin Krause, yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah.
yeah, he made an economist's remark, which, not that it was wrong. He was in a TV interview, and basically, more or less, he said that if the just Gestapo, the secret police of the Nazi would have been Argentina, would have been better because they would be so inefficient that would have killed less Jews. Oh, and the world, he was destabilized, in that position. The second candidate that they were thinking about is the guy who I recruited to Randianism. I used to love Ayn Rand. I still like her views for some things, but then I started studying Aristotle and other philosophers. But my friend remained as the key Randian of Argentina. His name is Eduardo Marti. And they were
he's been here. Eduardo's great.
Yeah, and they were considering Eduardo as minister. Then again, they considered someone who worked for me, and Gabriel Sanchezini, who was Minister of Education in the province of Buenos Aires. Martin is part mostly of the Juntos por el Cambio. I think he ended up as chief of staff of Jorge Macri, who is now head of the city of Buenos Aires, which has the status as a province, correct? So it has its own congressman and all that. But then they settled on a professor of Catholic University, Carlos Torrendel, a very good, very highly educated person that focuses on education, very good person. His presentation at the Congress, you can find it on YouTube. There was a lady there, there's one of the smartest women I ever met in my life, who passed also through me, through my work in the previous organization. Her name is Eleonora Urrutia. Eleonora, after spending 6 months in the Washington think tanks, came back to the chief of staff of the Ministry of the Interior of Argentina in the government of Menem. Then she served in another position with Menem. And then but after that, she married with one of the top economist engineers of Chile, Hernán Vigi, who was the architect of many of the reforms in Chile. And Eleonora, again, is Argentinian, but lives a big chunk of her time in Chile. I recommend, if people know Spanish, to follow her on Instagram, Maria Eleonora Urrutia, because she's explaining all the reforms of Milei step by step. Again, she's one of the most outstanding individuals I ever met. And she was building that, helping nurture that ministry. I think they offered her all the position. But she sort of resigned, a friendly resignation, after some of the first measures. Milei, when he was competing for Congress, signed the tax pledge that our friends at American for Tax Reform, now renamed Telos Foundation, makes Congress people sign in the United States. They pledge they will not raise taxes. Now, one of the first things that Milei's economic team did was to extend export taxes and to rescind income tax cancellation that had taken place before the elections. So under all definitions, that was a tax increase. And it in a way was against, the spirit of the reforms. So right now, education, I think, is essential for any free society. Carlos is an independent thinker, Carlos Torrendel. He's not so much in favor of the voucher structure, but he is in favor of enhancing choice, to give better life to human beings. So I'm familiar with that ministry. I don't want, there was having a pattern in the road to ministries in Javier Milei's government. Many people who were part of his inner team, and basically risked their reputation in a way. Remember, Milei was worse spoken than Donald Trump. I had friends of mine, close friends, who, because they criticized Milei with just four-letter words referring to him, to his family. So I usually don't get involved in primaries because today in politics, usually the choices are binary. And, and if you demonize someone before an election, then it's hard to get people to vote for them. But many people who early on, respected people like Carlos Rodriguez, for example, they mentioned the guy that started this Chicago Boy University in Argentina, then did not make to the ministry. But the others, basically when Milei was about to appoint them, they said, look, it's not only me, I want to appoint a team. I will join, but I need a team of people, and almost demanding that they have earned a spot in the government. And Milei said, and warned people that if he won the elections, it was going to be tabula rasa. It was going to be a blank. He was going to start from scratch and pick whoever was best for the circumstances he had in front, correct? And so some of those who have been displaced are being, more critical of Milei than others. But an area that you can read in the newspaper that is troublesome has to do with rule of law. As you know, Latin America, there are only three countries that sort of get a passing grade on rule of law, which are Costa Rica, Uruguay, and Chile. They have been having troubles, but they are the only one, in a scale of 0 to 10 would score like a 7. All the rest score like 4. So it means, there's no rule of law in most of Latin America. So and when there's no rule of law, speaking about the justice of the free market system, it's a joke. And in the Ministry of Justice, they put a person who was very tied to the caste, and because he was a lawyer for the entrepreneur that Milei worked for, by the name of Arnekian, who's a major owner of airport management in different parts of the world. And one of the first measures was to remove from the anti-corruption agencies and the agency that monitors money laundering in Argentina their power to prosecute. They said the role has to be just purely investigation and finding data, and they will pass it to the prosecutor. And what happened, so they say, well, I have been victims of state, agencies, being the prosecutor, the witness, the judge. So from the point of view of rule of law, I don't like some of these agencies being activists. But you see, our side plays by the rule. The other side doesn't. Look at the Department of Justice here of President Biden, totally politicized, persecuting political enemies, and letting their allies go free. So that issue caused some dissatisfaction in part of Milei allies and supporters, and the debate continues in front pages, because the gossip is that this is a pact of impunity with the crooks that ruled Argentina before. As the Peronists control the streets, and Cristina Kirchner is one of those great thieves of Argentina, the Kirchner couple, avoiding prosecuting her will guarantee some social peace. If you want to pivot here to that word, I first heard it with Milei when he spoke with Pope Francis, and during an interview, when he explained what happened in that call, he basically said, look, yeah, I know that some things, about his views, but I invited him with all the honors to Argentina. I think he can be an important force because he's a spiritual figure to achieve and to have some degree of social peace in Argentina. And interesting enough that the Pope now, I think, has invited Milei in mid-February to go to the Vatican. But basically, the appointments that have taken place in the judicial system have been a matter of concern of the leading people who have risked their lives fighting corruption in Argentina. And President Macri, in a way, I think, was soft too with Cristina Kirchner, because basically they're saying they are the ideal enemy. So they prefer to have her there as an enemy than having her in jail. Putting people in jail has not helped the good side in politics. Perón was in jail. President Chavez was in jail. We are seeing now what's going with President Trump. The more he's accused, the more he rises in the polls. But again, that's an area that I'm very concerned. So there are some good appointments, but I want to keep quiet. I'm afraid that if I endorse them, something will happen, and they put some roadblocks. But I'm hopeful that in other areas, like the environment, we will have good nomination. Again, I think Patricia Bullrich is a very good appointment, and I also think that the Defense Minister Petri is also a good appointment.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to get to. Milei is going to go meet with the Pope. What do you think of what do you think is going to happen with this? Because Pope Francis is from Argentina, and he's also clearly a communist, even though I thought, the communists hated religion. At least Pope John Paul, I will acknowledge, helped bring down the Berlin Wall. But now we're here with a Pope who probably wouldn't want to see the Berlin Wall come down.
No, let's see. No, Pope Francis or Cardinal Bergoglio is not a communist. He was actually sort of ostracized by his Jesuits teammates in Argentina because he would not endorse a Marxist view of liberation theology. He believes in something that's called the theology of the people, that you have to pay attention to what the base and the people say, but the people don't create sacrament, don't create doctrine. Now, the Pope is 87 years old. He never understood economics. His dad was an accountant, and he hated, how he devoted so much time in certain times of the year to accounting. There's a story about his brother, who was a small businessman who succeeded, in a car part business. And then, he once he made a lot of money, he bought an apartment in what would be Argentinian Fifth Avenue, Libertadora. I think you visited recently Argentina. And the Pope told him, or Bergoglio said, "Look, I will never visit you in that apartment." So he has a sort of grudge understanding all this richness that comes out of a true free market. But you have to understand, while the Pope was bishop in Buenos Aires, three jewels of Western capitalism, IBM, Siemens from Germany, Skanska from Scandinavia, they were all caught, confessed with enormous bribes in dealing with government and the private sector of Argentina. Correct? So he saw that.
Corporate welfare,
and
yes.
Them, oh, those are not capitalists. Yeah, it's a joke. It's like saying, socialist, you're never a socialist. So, unfortunately, he has this warped view. But again, I think he's not even good as a leftist. I love him as a pastor, but I'm a Roman Catholic. But not even as a conspirator, I think he's good. There are some bishops that he has been appointing during his tenure that are not, are far from being leftist. But again, his views and his way of behaving is very typical of the Buenos Aires people, the people in the capital, that speak about all topics with little foundation, that are loose in the use of words. And unfortunately, this has been causing great confusion and consternation in the Vatican.
Yeah, it seems like you sometimes have that with lots of people in big cities. When they try to speak for the rest of the country, and I know.
Correct. And I'm surprised because, again, one of my closest friends, oldest friends, is a bishop too, and he's the secretary of the Conference of Bishops of Argentina. And I think I published in Forbes a piece when I quoted my friends. He said, "The Pope is a man of few words." And there he goes giving speeches in planes here and there, using, making statements that we Roman Catholics know that they carry no dogmatic strength. When you speak in a plane or extemporaneously on a speech or a document, it's very different than when you speak in an encyclica or something, that is an official document of the church, and only a matter of dogma or matter of faith. If the Pope starts speaking about climate change, or air conditioning, I have to treat him with love, but I don't have to follow what he says, and right now, I think we are concerned about, put it the last week, things coming from the Pope. Okay, he called surrogate parenthood as deplorable and an affront to human dignity. Now, we know that the biggest enemy of the family has been Marxism. Marxism attacks two things, the family and private property. That are the two institutions that they explicitly try to destroy. And 2 days ago, he meets with the groups of 2 or 3 days of Marxists, and basically they can be great allies in our fight against corruption. So, so imagine he is there praising the ideology and the movement that is the biggest enemy of the basic constitution of the free society, and on the other hand, trying to sort of defend every now and then this traditional family. So again, but as he carries weight, and he's a respected figure, you cannot ignore Pope Francis. As you know, this person that I mentioned, Venegas Lynch Jr., I think in the closing act before the election, he ended his major speech by saying that Argentina should cut ties with the Vatican. So, then obviously, then Milei needs to mend fences with many of the people he insulted or wants to do it, because he cannot govern alone. Imagine he has less than 40 people in the chamber of Congress. So immediately, I think after he won my side, because again I'm a libertarian, but I'm a natural law libertarian. I believe in, like Frédéric Bastiat, I'm a Catholic, so I said, and von Mises was a great author, that I loved, that if the church and the free market and the capitalists attack each other, we are both doomed to failure. So we started building bridges with the world of faith and the Catholic Church, helping put together Friends of Milei, ministries of some of the ministers appointed by Milei, and he himself with church authority. So we didn't have a mass at the inauguration, but there was a very nice religious ceremonies at the cathedral with speakers from all different faiths, and Javier Milei is getting closer to Judaism, studying Judaism, but I think he's still searching. So we'll see what the impact will be of his visit to Pope Francis. When President Macri visited, at least the pictures, you could almost could not find a picture of a smiling Pope with President Macri, while you have pictures of Pope Francis with most of the dictators of the world, and they're almost with a nice smile in his face. So I think there are two things that you will have to monitor for the world that are very important. The first one perhaps is even more relevant. One of the first invitations that Milei gets after winning the election is by the World Economic Forum. When I see it, I basically said, look, I would only go, he speaks like before winning the election, but without the four-letter words, But basically, tell the truth about the lies of social justice, how it's being defined today. Tell the truth about how this doomsday environmental scene is just a sort of corrupt way of the elites to get money and control society. Share your views about protecting life, from conception. Milei is a pro-lifer, but don't go and play the game of the World Economic Forum and the Agenda 2030. So his chief, for a while, the foreign team did not want him to go. He decided he's going. So I do not know what Javier Milei will say. I do not know which other leader sympathetic to Milei views will go. Giorgia Meloni or Orban. In the free market movement, the key figure that is attending is Kevin Roberts, the president of Heritage Foundation. But again, if Milei speaks the same language of the World Economic Forum, then forget it. Then his future will be similar to President Macri. So we will go back to the old status Argentina, and with the same crooks in power. Look what happened in Brazil. My friends who fought corruption are now the ones being prosecuted, and the corrupt are mostly in power. And so the other thing would be, at least for, as you were, Acton is named after Lord Acton, this Catholic historian, famous for this thing he wrote when writing to a bishop. And I think about the church, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power tends to corrupt, absolutely. But again, I'm tremendously curious, and honestly, I cannot predict neither how Pope Francis or how Javier Milei will handle the visit in February.
Alex, having been in both countries, you brought up the issue of abortion, and most of the, at least in my experience, most of the countries in Central and South America are very much pro-family. I mean, America has completely and totally thrown all of that into the garbage now. We don't take marriage seriously. We're trying to change boys into girls and girls into boys. And this is ultimately one reason why I have more faith in Argentina than I do in America right now, because I don't think you've completely gone down that path. Where is Argentina with respect to that, though? Is it 20? I tell people, you don't want your country to end up like America in this sense, where, we're gonna have half of people over 40 never married at all. I mean, where is Argentina going on that? Because it definitely doesn't. It definitely does, seems like it's more like America than it is like Mexico, for example.
Well, I love you, but each of these countries, even when you say Mexico is such a mixture of so many different countries. You go to Chiapas or Nuevo León or Monterrey,
that's true, yes,
and Mexico City. My gosh! So even when you say what you just said, I don't know what you mean. You go to Oaxaca, there are 200 ethnic tribes.
Well, maybe El Salvador, for example. I saw El Salvador, and El Salvador is looks like it's. It still looks like it's very pro-family. I see pictures of women in Argentina with their hair dyed purple.
Yeah, and again, let me start. Family is a difficult topic to speak because each person, has its family or peccadillos or issues. So it's hard to sermonize about it. But I studied all the anthropologists that Adam Smith studied. When you study the origins of private property, the first institution was the family, and private property starts as a way to protect the intergenerational family. It's the first unit that starts as a break, between the states and the powerful. It's an essential unit, and that's why totalitarians of all sorts try to destroy it or capture it. And so I do not know, when you look at all world indicators, in the true respect for family, in rates of divorce, of marriage, honestly, I think there is diversity in Latin America. I see, again, as I spend time with my family, we're much more, I think, united, used to family time in Argentina. But I find as the United States and Europe has been aggressively pushing with propaganda ideas that want to destroy the traditional concept of the family, to turn each person into an individual, that can decide, their own truths, and which is for some capitalists, they love to have people with no family ties, with no houses, own nothing and you will be happy, like the World Economic Forum was pushing. They love it, but basically, as human beings have the social needs and tendency, that void tends to be filled by the state. And for me, the major damage that has been done by these forces and some of my libertarian cousins who are left-wing in everything except economics is that they divide the opposition to socialism. So, and many who dislike Milei pro-life and his vice president pro-family views, behind the scenes are actively trying to weaken and destroy him. They did that to Bolsonaro also, and in a way to President Trump. Again, these are not people whose family, they were married 3 times. I know Bolsonaro at least, perhaps 2. But when they had to come with policies, they appointed ministries that were strongly pro-life and strongly pro-family. And that goes counter the agenda being pushed today by most of European countries and the United States and Canada. So I will always recognize Javier Milei and Villarruel, and I think this might be a permanent victory that you couldn't. Right now, you can speak about being pro-life in Argentina and nothing happens. You can speak about the horrors that we had to suffer when the communists tried to take over Latin America and people decided to fight back from both sides. There were thousands of innocent victims. Before, the narrative was only one side was guilty. Is the military one day started shooting against this young, innocent idealist. That as you know, is a joke. Perón was in power, and Isabel Perón, when they decreed the annihilation of left-wing terrorism, because they were committing, daily attacks, bombs, kidnappings before the military came in 1976. So again, my answer first is I'm not the typical Austrian economist. I also trustee of the Fraser Institute, and we live by the motto: if it matters, measure it. I think Argentina is much more, how you say, value-oriented and church-oriented than, for example, Uruguay. But when it comes to rates of divorce and killing babies in the womb, the statistics I do not know, and I think there is a sort of how you say, the church. I'm sorry, the church and the model is turning to Boy Scouts, rather than showing the high ground of behavior. That's part of the problem. The awful problems that the church had with pedophilia and sex abuse had made many of these moral leaders lose prestige. Still, in most of Latin America, the military and the church are the most respected institution, but mostly because the other ones have gone so down. So again, the answer is I do not know how the dust will settle, and if you have to reconstruct society, it's essential, to have strong families. The family is the first unit that educates people. The first years of life, nutrition is essential, and so I think providing security, what Patricia Bullrich is doing. Well, and again, I don't know if you ever covered Bukele. It's Bukele, the president of El Salvador, from a country that was full of killing fields and crime, now having no crime. Again, it's a very difficult topic. I'm sure there must be some innocents in the jails of the thugs that he's putting in jail. Perhaps some are not thugs. But for me to practice the preferential option for the poor has to start by liberating the way the poor enter into the market, making it easy to start a small business, giving them protection, police protection, that in their way to school, they will not be stopped by a sex trafficker or a drug trafficker. Security of private property against internal and external attack is an essential element of the free society and a free market. And if you don't have that security, forget it. It would be very difficult to develop as a free nation. And Milei, has been saying it will take like 40 years to show how little populist he is in many topics. He doesn't say, do this and our problems will be solved tomorrow. No, he says almost 2 or 3 generations to change the mentality.
Yeah, and this has been one of the problems that free market reforms have had, is sometimes they'll result in some short-term pain, but they will end up with things better, but nobody looks that far ahead. And that's one thing. So this has been a really good show. Do you have anything else to say before we go about Milei? It looks like it's we've seen a lot more reforms of free. For example, he just deregulated housing. It looks like the housing market's doubled. Rents are dropping. I mean, and I was in an Airbnb there, and the Airbnb there wasn't that expensive, but it should be very interesting to see if housing gets cheaper. That's certainly going to impact a lot of people down there, because I suspect most people are not property owners.
More or less, yes, I would say most people are property owners, because nothing destroys cities like rent control. And Perón was one of the major destructors of the free society, of the middle class, when he was, while he was creating inflation, he froze rent control, and he put rent control that everyone, the middle class who had a second house to rent, lost tons of money due to inflation. And they would give low interest rate only to the friends of the government. The military did some bad things, but during the military regime of 76, 79, the military liberated also the rents, eliminated rent control. Remember that they privatized the post office. Menem then privatized the post office. And so not everything was bad, but again, as what we lack are the basic institutions of rule of law. But let me finish with asking your audience first, don't fall into the trap of the U.S. commentators that have not been in Latin America or Argentina, or lived a long time there, that they basically cater to their donors. So they're trying to sell pictures, that, look, this reform of Milei, I helped to do it, or Milei, it's thanks to us. Or that they turn tables and they say Milei is a total fake because, look, he's relying on executive decrees to be able to govern. So it's another Peronist. Try to do what you do. Well, not everyone can go to Argentina, but pay attention and compare him with what's going on in other countries that try to reform. Pay attention to what he will say at the World Economic Forum, because it will give you an indication if the effort will be for real. And for me, as the axis of evil has strong controls in Brazil, in Bolivia, in Colombia, in even Chile, in Mexico, in Nicaragua, most of Latin America is in hands of the left. If they would have gotten total control of Argentina, forget it. The United States cannot fight the battle for freedom alone. And from China to Russia to Iranian interest, they would be controlling most of the political decisions in Latin America. And so the longer the Milei phenomenon lasts, the more the likelihood that other countries will change. We're going to face an election in the United States, and I think the next government, hopefully, if it's not Democrat, will be more friendly to free market forces in Latin America. But again, I wrote an interview that's about to come in Italy. As President Trump and his way of behaving has to do a lot for his love for World Wrestling, the World Wrestling Federation. And he sees he sees the world leaders as fake leaders. But still, here comes the small guy from Korea. Here comes the Ottoman Turk, mounted in his horse, or the Putin, making show of his chest. But he governed a little bit and treats these leaders that way, saying, I love them, but no, I love them. I get along well with them. But then he disagrees and would like to defeat them. Milei is an opera guy. And, his experience of going to the theaters, and with his chainsaws and with his lion type of hair makeup, he is the protagonist of an opera. And it will have ups and downs. I wrote that I hope he doesn't finish that as many opera characters, So, but give him a chance. Try to support his good measures. Don't listen to what I say, but listen to other commentators, and then start judging by the facts. I hope you started the program saying this is like the most important election in history. I think it could be a pivot to a new America, and I will do all my best to help them in this very difficult road ahead.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to. Well, it's and this might impact the rest of South America. So it's been really great having you on here, Alex. So where can we find you on the net?
I have some tweeters. I tend not to be super active, but Chafuen, my surname, is my English Twitter feed, and you can find me on Instagram. And then my organization website is very simple. It's Acton, like acton.org, acton.org. That's my main occupation, and managing director of the international area of the Acton Institute. And I'm about to head for Portugal, Spain, and Brazil this next week.
Okay, well, it's been great having you there. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Give it a thumbs up. Check out my novel, Escape from the Village. I'm Chris Baker, and we're out.